Bonjour, willkommen and howdy, and welcome back to the FARG Motorpool. So what are we doing today? We are working on this behind me. This is the Renault R2087 or 2087. It's a 1950s medium-sized truck used by the French Army, and we're just getting it ready to get it back on the road for this show season. So we'll go into some depth what exactly we're doing and the history of the vehicle, where it came from, and the jobs that we're working on at the moment. But let me just give you a breakdown of the history of the Renault lorries or small trucks. So 1945, French economy was in a mess. The French government took over Renault temporarily at that point to get it back on its feet. They came out with a 1-ton truck, so the specification was a 1-ton van, if you want to call it, and that was really to combat the Citroën, who just brought out the H van, which is that sort of ribble tin side. You see them travelling around with Swish coffee shops in the back. So Renault had come out with a very similar van. Peugeot had as well, quite an ugly duckling, I'm afraid the Peugeot van was, but these were all around 1945 to 1947. This was called the Renault 1000. The reason it was called 1000 kg is because it could carry a ton, and it was a true workhorse, and they went on being used, and you would have seen them in French markets, driving around doing agricultural jobs, etc., right up into about the 80s or even the 90s. So we get back to about 1952. The van had been very successful, but the military wanted to get in on the action. They'd been using their GMCs and their Dodges, their 4x4s and 6x6s that had been left by the American Army, and they wanted to use some of their homegrown talent. So therefore they commissioned Renault to produce the R2087. As you can see, it's a bit of an ugly duckling, let's be absolutely honest. So they came in lots of different configurations. Some of them had a hard cab, some of them had a hard cab and then a hard back or hard shell on the back, and they were mostly used for ambulances. And then this came out, which was a soft top cab and a cargo body with the canvas on the back. The reason for this is this can then fold down, the back can come off, and this particular cab here can fold down, the windscreen folds away, and it makes quite a low silhouette. Also enables it to go onto aircraft and into boats very easily. So these were really popular. They were used quite extensively by the army and also by the gendarmerie, which is obviously part of the forces in France. So this is a particular one, is a gendarmerie one, so it is quite low mileage. So that's about 1952 this came out. They only produced them for a short while, but they kept within service, and someone may correct me on the comments below, but I think I've seen photographs up until about 1986, 87 with these probably in reserve, but certainly still being used. So quite a rugged truck. I think the reason that they lasted so long is the fact that you can really work on these quite easily. Everything can be greased, there's grease nipples galore over it, everything can be replaced quite readily, and it's quite a simple and easy truck to work on. So we're actually really enjoying ourselves having a tinker with this at the moment. Where were they used? So the French, obviously they were used, I've seen photographs of them carrying baguettes, I've seen them carrying 12 troops in the back, I've seen radio versions, I've seen them on policing actions when they were brought out onto the streets in Paris with policemen in the back and all jumping out and getting a feral ding-dong in one of their riots over there. So quite a lot of use. This particular one is gendarmerie. I think it had quite a nice life. It looks like it was rebuilt in 1973. So if you think it was built in 62, built in 52, then it's 1962, 72. So it was like, it had 20 odd years, and then it got fully rebuilt, probably went into storage, and then came out in auctions in and around the late 80s. It was purchased by a man who lived in the Ardennes. He drove it around, collecting wood in it from the forest, and then I purchased it. When it came into the UK, it was a little bit sorry looking. The paint was a bit faded. The clutch had gone. I don't know how the chap was driving it. He must have been just judging and throwing those gears in. The brakes were a bit spongy, and the radiator had a leak. So we did some immediate work on it to get it ready for the show season in the UK. So we did a few years with it, back and forth, and we had a great time in it. But What's happened now is we were using it relatively recently, hauling some scrap to a local scrap yard, and there's no temperature gauge. You can't really tell whether what temperature the engine's running at, but it was obviously running far too hot. It started whistling like a kettle and then eventually went pop. That was one of the coolant hoses had popped off, and we were in a bit of a pickle halfway up a hill just on the outskirts of Bristol. So it was brought home in disgrace, placed into the back of the unit, and we haven't really looked at it since. So we felt it's time to release a new lease of life into the R2087. So what we've done at the moment is we have completely rebuilt the engine. We've skimmed the head, we've put in a new clutch, we've done the entire braking system, including the shoes and the cylinders and the master cylinder. We've cleaned out the fuel lines, we've put in new filters, we've done a complete fluid change on all of it. Now, we haven't finished, so we are here at the moment still working on it today, but it's looking really good. So let me talk you through some of the facets of this engine and why we rebuilt it. So the engine, without the temperature gauge, had overheated, and inside of this particular design is a 1.8 or a 1.9 petrol engine. It's a 4-cylinder inline, and what had happened, they've got what's described as dry liners. So there is a cylinder. Here we have one. So this is the cylinder that sits down inside of the engine, and the water circulates around it. So when the engine gets worn, what you can do is knock these cylinders out, and then you buy a full new set that come with their own pistons already in place, come with their new gudgeon pins, and you actually drop these this way round. You drop these into the engine, and by putting the head back on and tightening the head down, it forces these into place so that you can actually replace the innards of the engine. So it's quite a funky way of doing it. What had happened, we had noticed when we took the engine apart, there was water in the sump. The sump was mayonnaising all the time, and what it turned out to be wasn't a leaky head after all. It was actually these cylinders at the very bottom. They sit here, this ridge sits inside the engine block, and if you look very, very closely on this one, you can actually see how it's corroded. So the fact is there was quite a lot of corrosion, and then that's the only part that was seating in the block and stopping it from leaking. There is a copper washer that goes in here, and that had been crushed already, so taking the head off and putting it back on wasn't going to solve it. So we purchased a brand new set of these wrapped in cosmoline from a defunct military base in France, and it came with a full gasket set, it came with the pistons, it came with the liners, and it even came with the instructions of how to fit it, all written in English, including torquing the heads, how to do all the different gaskets, how to run the engine in, and all the parts. What a it's also in French as well, but what a fantastic thing to find. So this was put into a box in about 1952, and we opened it for the first time only about a week ago. So the engine's been rebuilt. We have just did a one warm test on it. I'll show you a bit of footage with us starting it there. We've retorqued the head back down so it's as we want it. Now we just need to do some tappet adjustments at cold, and then it's basically running in the engine. Running in an engine is quite an old terminology. Lots of people might not understand that. Running in an engine is when it's been rebuilt, you can't rag it because you're actually going to break it. So what you have to do is run it under load. So that means driving up hills, having weight in the back, etc., pulling things along, but not at a very low speed. Why do you need to run an engine in? Okay, so when we'll look at the pistons popping out here, when these piston rings, and there's 3 of them here, as well as an oil scraper, when they start going up and down inside of a either rebored or new cylinder, you will find that there's tiny little ridges on the top of that hardened steel of those rings, and they need to bed themselves in, so they need to wear themselves away so they fit within the cylinder to make a oil tight and pressure tight seal. So that takes a while actually. You use running in oil, which does help, but then you just need to do this for about 500 miles, and then the engine is bedded in and it's ready to be driven normally. So that's what running in is. Lots of people talk about glaze busting. What's that got to do with running in? Indeed, if you aren't going to replace your cylinders and it's just the cylinder rings, then you need to put some sort of whetstones. It's on a three-legged contraption that drops inside that cylinder and clears it out. The reason for that is because you've been running the engine at high temperature, then you would have found the steel on the inside of the cylinder has become quite hardened, and so it won't help bed in the new piston rings because they're just sliding up and down on a very hard surface. So therefore what you need to do is take that surface off, and therefore we're back to metal upon metal, which will bind itself wear itself in as it goes. So very quick rundown there. Where did the Renault come from? We know that it was up against the H2 van. I must be honest, I think the H2 van did better in the end. The secret of the H2 van was it was front wheel drive, and therefore you had no sort of paraphernalia or equipment under the floor, so you could have a very low floor and a flat floor in it, which is perfect for standing up inside of it, which then means you can serve people through a hatch on the side. Couldn't really do this in the Renaults. There was still infrastructure underneath the floor, and the head height, you were always stooping, and it gave you a bad back. So let's crack on, have a look around the vehicle, and we'll show you some of the jobs we've been doing. Okay, so this is the first startup in at least 4 years on this one since the engine's been rebuilt. So we've got electronic fuel pump, that's gone on. We then need to pull this out, which is the ignition, and you get a light on the dash. We're then going to check it's in neutral, and then we reach down for the starter ring and we pull it. There we go, circuit that. And then looking round, you see the tappet, very, very slight rev. Now the exhaust pipe's not attached at the moment, so hence it's quite noisy, but beautiful little tick over there. And obviously we haven't ran it, so we've got a water temperature sensor. We're going to wait until that rises, then we have to re-torque the head back down again with the second setting on the torque wrench. So yeah, very good. As I said before, this is quite a ugly duckling, and I think only its mother could love it. It's got a small cab in there, so what we've got in here in the front, so we haven't got the radiator in at the moment and the grill's off, so let's go in and have a look. What you can actually see is here's the engine. So this is a 1.9 4-cylinder straight in there. You've got a single downdraft carburetor. Obviously we've got a head here, it's made out of aluminium. The block's made out of steel. You've got a dizzy in here. There's usually a manual fuel pump, but you can see over the back here I've put an electronic one because I think the manual was struggling slightly. This is a modification we've done. They didn't have temperature gauges, as I said, but we've actually put a temperature gauge into this front plate so we won't get caught out next time. Fan, dynamo, and the crank, as you can see, it can be started by a cranking handle. Quite a deep sump they've got in there, but it's not much more oil. I think it's about 5 litres in there. We've put this on as a temporary measure, which is a little online temperature gauge, so we can keep an eye on it whilst we're running it in. So quite a simple engine. You can see here the history or the ancestry of the truck. So the cab was used by the civilian market, but because this is a 4x4 version, you can see it's quite lifted up. You can see it's got these quite intense springs in there, and you're sitting quite way off the ground. Then you can see that there was a fillet in here that they filled by dropping this wheel arch down, so it's more akin to the lines of the wheel. Also, the difference between this and the civilian version was the fact that they also put in strengthening here. So we've got a bar coming down and there's one going across, and this was filled in. The reason for that being because there is no hard cab on here, the integrity of the cab was undermined by the fact that this metal had been taken off, and now it's only just canvas, so they've had to put in this reinforcing. So that's quite a step, you know, to get from down here up to that, over this and in. So it does mean that people did sort of grab this steering wheel a lot, and that's one of the downsides of these, and you all should look out for it if you ever think of buying one, is putting on this every time is just eventually loosening it and making the steering quite loose. Back in there's the engine. There is a cover that goes over this that go on later. A couple of very simple levers. Over here you've got the 4x4, so it's forward at the moment, it's in 2-wheel drive. Pull it back and it engages the 4. You've got, whoops, going round, a handbrake, very reminiscent to what you'd see on sort of a Ford Model A car. Gear shift, 4 forward, 1 reverse. Also this little thing on the side is what you click down to get your reverse, so it gets you through that gate. So very archaic really, but then again, as I said, it was made in 1952. 2 people seated at the front, and you can just see again, you can see over here, this is where the rifles go, so that's the rifle holders there. Here we are at the back, and we're just having a look at these wheels. They are very big. I think that's what helps it get such a good turn of speed. So let's have a measure across and see what we've got. 88 centimeters, 34-inch wheels across there on what is quite a small truck. Split rims, you can tell by these nuts in here, and also these are quite interesting. I'll give you a couple of seconds to have a think about what these could possibly be before I tell you. So they are hooked and they're spring loaded in the middle. Okay, any guesses? Okay, that is for snow chains. So chains would go on and they would hook into here, and this spring-loaded little clip here is what held them in place. So it's quick to get those chains on there. Over here, if we look at the fuel system going across, then you will recognise this from World War II military vehicles, sort of the Hotchkiss and the Willis Jeep as well, and it's the same fuel bowl as you've come across before. So that's about the only place that you've got any commonality with any other equipment that the French had in service at the time. The US kit, it was just that bowl. Not much to say about in the back here, but what you will notice is over the back, just in this space here, that's where the batteries are held. So it's a 24-volt system, so you've got 2 batteries in series just under that cover. The spare wheel is just behind the cab. It's quite a funky design, this one. It's simply undone at the bottom, and it's actually on a cantilever, and you actually pull on this frame and the whole wheel comes towards you slowly, and it folds down onto the floor, and you're able to roll the wheel out, roll the next one in, lift it back up in there, and you tighten up this at the bottom, and you're away. I think that was a great little design feature. That on the opposite side of the cab, then that's where you'd have the Pioneer tools. The body at the back's very simply made out of wood. It's in a steel frame. We have hoops going over the tops. There's 4 of those, and they can be all brought together and the whole thing collapse down. These do go in and around here simply because the water's been getting into it. The first place they actually go is at the rear, simply because we've got a few things in here at the moment, but simply because the water runs over the tailgate and goes in and rots the floor out. But this one's in good nick. It was obviously spent much of its life inside rather than outside, and yeah, it was a good little starting truck to work on.